stand up for and what we stay silent about, what we monetize versus what we actually live matters. I have so much to say about the last 2 years of my life, but tonight is not the forum. What I will speak to separately is the feeling of being a woman who has a voice today. It's not for us to have shame. It's for them.
Blake Lively is in major legal trouble, and this time, there's no getting out of it. Hey besties, welcome back to the channel. Big news today. Blake Lively and the Wayfarer parties are officially being pulled into a settlement conference, and this is serious. There's no way around it. The court has formally ordered them to participate, and failing to show up or cooperate could actually be considered contempt of court. As it stands, their attorneys are required to join a video conference on December 15th with Magistrate Judge Sarah Cave. The purpose of this meeting? To figure out the logistics of a settlement conference, like whether it will happen in person, over the phone, or via video. Once that's sorted, Judge Cave will propose dates, and the parties will work together to pick what fits best for everyone. Now here's the thing. Because this is a court order, participation isn't optional. Ignoring it could land them in real trouble. But you might be wondering, what exactly is a settlement conference, and what does it even mean? There's a lot of confusion floating around online. Some people think that all cases in New York, or even in all federal courts, must automatically go to settlement. That's not true. In the Southern District of New York, there's no rule forcing every case to settle. Instead, settlement conferences are used strategically, especially in high-conflict civil cases where the two sides are totally opposed. These are the cases that really put a strain on the court system because constant back and forth and filings and motions can overload judges and court resources. Basically, a settlement conference is a tool to try and ease that pressure while giving the parties a chance to find common ground without going to trial, though it's not guaranteed that a deal will happen. High-conflict cases can really put a huge strain on the court system. Think about it. Every time a dispute comes back to court for resolution, it eats up time and resources, essentially overloading the system. Judges have to handle all these requests, motions, and filings, which slows down everything else in the courts. So, when a case is especially messy or contentious, one of the best ways to lighten the load is to encourage the parties to settle instead of dragging it all the way through trial. But here's the thing. Settlement isn't exactly what most people imagine. It's not as simple as walking into a room and saying, "You owe me $15 million and I'll drop everything." That's not how it works at all. In this situation, a magistrate judge, a neutral third party, oversees the settlement process. Their job is to help both sides find some common ground and work toward a resolution that, while it might not check every single box for anyone, is fair and workable for everyone involved. It's a compromise, not a magic solution. From my own experience with settlement conferences a few years back, I won't say for what case, you can absolutely walk in and say, "I'm not going to settle." That's your right. But these magistrates and judges are experts at managing high-conflict situations. They know how to help each side understand the other's perspective and also make it clear where your case might be vulnerable if it went to trial. In other words, they highlight the weak spots in your arguments so you can make a more informed decision. Going to trial isn't just about legal arguments, it's also about exposure. Once a case goes public, everything's on the table. Secrets, private communications, and behind-the-scenes details can all come out. For someone like Blake Lively, or honestly anyone, the stakes are enormous. In her case, a lot of information has been hidden under seal, but a trial would remove that protection. This is exactly why a magistrate judge can play such a critical role. They can help both sides see that maybe their case isn't as strong as they thought. And sometimes, the best outcome isn't winning or losing. It's finding a peaceful resolution that works for Blake, Ryan Reynolds, and Wayfarer alike. From my own settlement experience, you don't even have to be in the same room with the other side. We did a video conference where everyone joined together for the main discussion, and then the judge used breakout sessions to meet separately with each party. This allows everyone to speak freely while still working toward a solution. So here's how it typically works. Everyone comes together at the start to go over the day's agenda. Then, each side meets privately with their own legal team while the judge moves between the two sides. That's how my experience went, and it's pretty standard. On my side, we discussed the key points, what we wanted, our main concerns, and our version of the story. Then the judge would meet with the other side and hear them out. What makes a magistrate judge so effective is their ability to view everything neutrally from both perspectives. They explain the other side's concerns, clarify each party's position, and suggest potential solutions that could resolve the issues at hand. Here's the important part: they cannot force anyone to settle. They can't make Blake and Ryan apologize, and they can't make Justin pay for something he didn't do. If either side digs in their heels and refuses to compromise, nothing will happen. But if both parties are open and willing to work through it, a resolution that works for everyone is possible. And let's be real, it won't always be perfect. It might not align with what you want, or even what I think is right. But in the legal world, settlements are about compromise, not perfection. Also, apologies are extremely rare in settlements because legally, apologizing admits liability. That means Blake and Ryan would never publicly apologize, whether they settle or go to trial, because admitting they lied could open the door to lawsuits for malicious prosecution. What often comes out instead is a carefully worded statement. For example, after a settlement, someone might say something like, "Upon reflection, I realize that during the stressful and exhausting process of making this film, I may have misunderstood certain situations. After working through the settlement, I now understand that Bellin and Wayfarer acted with good intentions." See the difference? They acknowledge the process without ever admitting wrongdoing. Settlements don't always involve money either. In my experience, no money changed hands. No one paid attorney fees. Everyone simply walked away. And yes, it can feel unsatisfying, but that's just how the federal court system works. Under the American rule, each side typically pays their own legal fees, and damages aren't handed out unless they actually occurred. You also can't force a party like Wayfarer to give up rights to a film just because someone asks. Leverage plays a huge role here. For instance, Wayfarer could say, "I'll agree not to appeal. I'll agree not to sue for malicious prosecution. I'll agree to certain concessions if you walk away empty-handed." Both sides have leverage, and using it effectively can determine the outcome. Judging by the current evidence and admissions, Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer seem to be in the strongest position to negotiate a settlement that works in their favor. So now we're at a standing order, which makes things really serious. And you might be wondering why I think there's a strong chance Justin Baldoni could either win or get a very favorable settlement if this went to trial. Well, it comes down to the recent evidence and admissions that have surfaced in court. For instance, when Blake filed her responses related to the 56.1 statement of undisputed facts, she admitted to certain actions that have now put her in a really tricky position. One of the biggest issues is that she admitted she lied, and this is listed in point 42 of the 56.1 undisputed facts. Here's why that matters. Blake also disclosed that her husband, Ryan Reynolds, actually wrote the revisions to the rooftop scene that she had previously claimed as her own. That's undisputed. Why is this a problem? Because the 5 points leading up to that were all about how Blake had supposedly been pressuring him to accept her changes. She allegedly involved friends like Taylor Swift and Ryan himself to convince the other party to accept the revisions. Blake even exchanged texts claiming that she was the one writing and revising the scene, but she never disclosed that it was actually Ryan doing the work. In other words, she represented the work as her own while lying about it, which is the kind of misrepresentation that can completely undermine her credibility in court. Once a plaintiff admits to lying about even one thing, it casts doubt on everything else they say. If Blake were to take the witness stand, the judge could instruct the court and the jury that her statements cannot automatically be taken as fact because she has already admitted to lying under oath. That's a huge problem, especially when you consider the amount of pressure and manipulation involved in this case. The lies don't just affect her, they also impact Ryan. What looked like Blake taking control might have actually been her covering for her husband, which makes both of them appear less credible in front of the court. And it's obvious just by reviewing the undisputed facts. There are multiple instances where Blake admits to misleading others. This issue is likely to play a huge role during settlement discussions, and if it went to trial, she would be a terrible witness, as every lie could be used against her. Another major obstacle for Blake is proving that what Wayfarer did during their alleged smear campaign wasn't just a response to Blake and Ryan's own media actions. There are admissions showing that Wayfarer did, in fact, plant negative stories about Baldoni, including hiring Leslie Sloan to call him abusive and chauvinistic. They also admitted to the August 9th Daily Mail article, which painted Baldoni as controlling and dismissive, framing the rooftop scene revisions as a matter of creative control. Now, Blake and Ryan would need to convince a jury that they deserve damages for reputation harm, even though the media coverage they contributed to paints a very different picture, essentially giving Wayfarer the defense that they were just protecting themselves. It gets worse. They also admitted to misusing the legal system via Vanzin by filing a baseless lawsuit to obtain evidence, which was then handed over to the New York Times without notifying the other side. On top of that, claims given to the media, like the Shasty Flaw video about the bump, had no evidence backing them. And here's the twist. Blake and her team also claimed that they had supposedly conspired with the New York Times to plan a story back in August of 2024. But here's the kicker. They admit there's no evidence for that at all. It's completely undisputed that Justin Baldoni had nothing to do with any of the negative articles. Now, we don't know if the judge personally reads every single document, but his clerks almost certainly do. And they could be flagging some serious red flags. She's admitting to lying, admitting that stories were planted, admitting she misrepresented her husband's role, and acknowledging that this case isn't just about her. It's about both her and Ryan. Which brings up a key question. Is this really a case of sexual harassment? Or is it, as Wayfarer has framed it, more about a hostile takeover of a film project? That distinction is huge because it affects how the court sees liability and damages. Blake has a very strong incentive to settle. The humiliation of all this airing out in a public trial could be career-ending for her and Ryan. Honestly, their reputations are already shaky, and going to trial could make it worse. Think back to what happened with Amber Heard. Her trial completely derailed her career. She lost, didn't admit she was wrong, and now she's almost invisible in Hollywood. Even if Blake were to go to trial and lose, she would not publicly admit wrongdoing because legally, that would open her up to more liability. A skilled magistrate, though, could act like a mediator, helping Blake and Ryan see that they might not actually have a strong case and that going to trial could be catastrophic. A good magistrate could also guide Wayfarer to understand that an apology from Blake or Ryan isn't legally possible due to liability issues. But what could happen is a carefully crafted statement that both sides agree to release, resolving the dispute without anyone being forced to admit fault. Now, is that solution perfect? Absolutely not. It doesn't erase their legal responsibility, but it prevents a public trial disaster and at least allows everyone to move forward without further escalation. So what do you think? Will Blake and Ryan go for a settlement, or will they risk it all in court? Stay tuned till the end, because the outcome could seriously shake Hollywood. And you won't believe some of the details about how these admissions might completely unravel their claims if it ever went to trial. If you're as shocked as I am, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe for more updates, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think they'll settle or fight? Hit the bell icon so you never miss the next video. Thanks so much for watching, besties. See you next time.